There are 5 perfect truths. Once these truths are understood, we solve our social problems. The truth is one. The first perfect truth is that truth is one. There is only one way for truth to exist, only one way for all facts to be assembled. The truth is holistic. It is coherent. If you know one part of the truth, the entire truth is accessible to you. There are 2 realities that can be deduced from this proposition. If truth is all of one substance, then of necessity that which is of another substance is of another class of thing. There being only one truth that is coherent and of all one substance, it follows there is the right way to think, act and do, and there is another way which of necessity must be the wrong way. The wrong way will never solve anything and never fit in with that body of things called the truth. Lies are always going to contradict what is true. Lies will never fit in with the facts that make up what is true. What is more, lies do not just contradict the truth. Since there is only one truth and that is coherent, lies will ultimately contradict itself. Lies cannot be coherent as only the truth is coherent. The one measure of truth is consilience. Consilience leads to coherence, and coherence of all facts into a single unassailable understanding is the only measure of reality there is. Consilience is the principle that evidence from independent, unrelated sources can converge to support strong conclusions. In other words, when different lines of inquiry, research, or observation all point toward the same answer, the resulting agreement is a powerful indication of truth. This unity of knowledge, where facts and findings across disciplines fit together like pieces of a puzzle, strengthens our confidence in the reality they describe. Consilience is not simply about accumulating facts, but about achieving coherence, a harmony among all parts of understanding that reveals a deeper, more reliable truth. If your reality is riven with inconsistencies and incompatible ideas, then your reality is illusory and built on lies or fashioned from lies. The principle that all truth is one suggests that all truth will fit in with any particular truth, regardless of origin or subject matter. Science and faith are 2 faces of the same truth. Science and faith are not incompatible, they are not inconsistent. Science and faith are 2 different ways of seeing the same truth. There are 2 great perspectives we can adopt when seeking the truth. We can approach the truth through the way of nature and pragmatics or faith. The truth is revealed by our works. When we understand how an internal combustion engine works, we can fix it. Yet, faith is needed in our ability and knowledge and in the way reality works. Faith can never be disavowed. We must have faith in the orderliness of nature. We need to have faith that what worked yesterday will work today and tomorrow. We could not function without faith. All the laws in the universe will not overcome a lack of faith. If we do not believe anyone will follow the law, or if we do not have faith in justice, the law becomes of no effect. We need to have at least enough faith in the law to stop at a red light and go on the green. But the law is an imperfect solution. Faith is always needed. The Bible says we need faith to be saved, but it also declares the need for works. Some secularists say only science is needed to solve our problems. Christians argue that it is faith in Jesus that is the answer to our problems. But the Bible declares faith and works are needed. We are expected to have an answer for the faith we have. Science is all about works and Christianity is about faith. But science needs faith and Christianity needs works. Each has, however, marginalized the importance of the other, and both have failed to fulfill their potential. Christians often worry that appeals to science will diminish the importance of Christ. Secularists are revolted by the idea of introducing faith into science. Yet, the 2 are not enemies. Works is science, but one must still work with faith. When Jesus calls for works, he is not simply telling us to be useful. Works done in faith are works done scientifically, that is with knowledge, because these are works done with the certainty of results. To do works in faith is to do work systematically with purpose and a quantifiable way to measure success. If we work in faith, we must work trusting in the results. If we believe God has a purpose and He gave to each of us a purpose, then did He not give us a way to verify we are doing His will? Christianity needs science to truly give glory to God. Faith is ultimately a belief there is a purpose to our life and a purpose to what we are doing. Faith tells us there is an objective way to determine where we are going and how fast or slow we are moving. Faith in Jesus is faith in Him but also in what He has told us and prepared for us. If we work in faith, we work in His will, that is, we work according to the plan He has laid out for us. If we do this, we work according to an objective standard. So works and faith come together in a life guided by Jesus, yet with an objective correlate. A priorists believe the value of the planet is an object measure of our own worth. Scaled down to the level we work at, this means we must increase the value of the assets we have available to us. This is the church. The value we add to assets is, at least to an a priorian separatist, the church. Science gives us the tools we need to do good works, and Jesus gives us the faith and the trust we need to use them. Without faith in Jesus, we cannot have faith in others and the way He has set out for us. The three fronts truth. The third truth is that there are three fields of engagement. Mankind needs to operate on all three areas if we are to have a church. We cannot produce the works that produce the fruits we are required to produce, unless we span all three fronts. To generate real change and value in this world, we need to engage the political, the economic, and the ecclesiastical arenas. Most of us are focused on one of these three fronts. There are people who are fanatic about politics and support one political party over another as if the next election was going to solve all of the world's problems. Others demand the creation of a new political party, as if the new one will be different than all the ones that came before. Others are more engrossed in economics. They may be preoccupied with their own personal success or with obtaining concessions for one group or another. Many people go into politics or activism in the expectation this will enable them to shift resources from one sector or group to another. They think this will produce greater justice. Still others are engaged in religion or missions. They think either their religion will solve the world's problems, or they think justice requires they help others in the name of their religion. However, the political will not get solved without solving the financial problems, and unless we motivate people through religion, there will be no final resolution to the conflicts that people having different faiths produces. In short, any reform we engage in must encompass the financial, organizational, and spiritual elements of human existence. The truth of the four pillars. The four pillars are the four areas of the three fronts in which reform is needed. The four pillars of truth could also be referred to as the four pillars of civilization. We need to develop along these four areas to have a viable civilization. Truth works through the areas of ownership, markets, administration, and money. If these four areas do not progress, civilization will not develop. The more these four factors are reformed, the more stable and resilient the society we are in. Personal ownership is ownership of the things we need to survive. Homes, cars, food, clothes, and so on are personally owned items. We have a right to own items for personal use. These are things we need to enable us to add value to the assets of the world. Public ownership is ownership of assets ostensibly owned by the people but under the authority of the state. Public-owned assets are held in trust for the people, as if the people were a minor or a mentally challenged entity. Private ownership is often equated with personal ownership as if the two were different versions of the same thing. This is not the case. Privately owned assets are a mirror image of public ownership. Property is privately owned by virtue of a state-provided license. The license is a permission slip authorizing a person to act as if they were the sole authority in charge of an asset. Private ownership is a form of ownership that is authorized by the state. In this sense, it replicates the way taxes were collected by private individuals licensed by the state. Agorocratic ownership is ownership by the market, or more succinctly, ownership by market value. Agorocratic ownership is the ownership of all assets not needed for personal use that is then put in the market. In this form of ownership, an asset is allocated based on supply and demand. Assets go to where the demand is greatest to produce the greatest value for the market. A community is composed of personal property owners who own the residual value of the community as an investment. It is upon this pool of assets or investment capital that the community issues its currency. These credits or preferred shares serve as a currency. When labor creates value through the modification of an asset, the community or church issues preferred shares to cover the cost of the labor. This permits the market to function using the labor theory of value. Agorocratic markets are not what liberals call a free market, nor are they command markets such as communists have. Agorocratic markets respond solely to the supply and demand pressures of purchases and sales. An agorocratic market is simply the economic activity of buyers and sellers. Agorocratics is the world's first flat system of administration. Democracy is touted as one of the greatest devices ever created, but it is not without its problems. The first democracy was little more than a debating society for rich slave-owning Athenians. Direct democracy allows the majority to wield absolute power. Representative democracy puts authoritarian power into the hands of an elected representative. If first past the post voting is used to elect a representative, the totalitarian power of the majority is put into the hands of a champion debater. Various mediating elements have been introduced, for example electoral colleges and proportional systems. Proportional systems divide the voting bloc into constituencies, with each constituency counting as a single vote. Agorocracy is grassroots. Only local elections are held. Those elected are known intimately by the electors. The election creates a council, and the council votes in a mayor and the successively higher offices. All policy originate at the base is debated and modified as per the principle of subsidiarity only at the applicable levels. Elections are ad hoc, meaning no set elections are held. When the voters determine a change is needed, the change is made. People are elected on the basis of individual positions. If a higher operational level is not making the decisions the people require, then changes is made at the bottom to ensure changes are made on the upper levels. Policy originates at the base. Agorocratic currency is a way to fund public works without taxation or the risk of inflation. The problem with conventional solutions to funding is that ideas and solutions are subject to the law of supply and demand. A good idea will only be financed if there is sufficient demand for it. But the demand does not come from the consumer, but investors. What they want to know is how much profit is in it, for them. This means production rests, not on the actual validity of the idea but on the liquidity of those who want the idea implemented. It does not matter if 2 million people want to see a factory built if they do not have access to the required capital. 2 million people with no money may prefer a waterfall remain in its natural state, but one person with billions can make it more probable a dam will be built. The lie is that if we lack the capital, public works will not be built. Perhaps, but if there are no skilled workers and no raw materials, capital means nothing. Capital is no more than numbers written at the end of a balance sheet. In truth, capital is a myth and a metaphysical abstraction. The Amish build barns whenever needed. They have no need of capital, given a workforce and a few basic raw materials. It is not the capital that is important, it is the faith of those involved. With faith, all things are possible. Thousands of children are supplied with Christmas dinners and presents every year without the children having money or being able to generate economic demand. Capital is vital in a system in which capital represents demand, but if the use of money disappeared, would trade cease? All that is needed for an economy to work is a system of accounts. We do not need billionaire capitalists. We do not need the state to funnel money from donor group to recipient group. All we need is faith in each other and a decision that the project is needed. The state is not a service provider. The state brokers between a demand and a supply. The electorate want a road, so the state chooses a financier group and a provider group and funds the project. But if a family can use what it has to build a tree house, or if the family can enable children to put on a play, why can't a community build a road, sewer, school, or whatever else the community needs, using what the community has? It is not a matter of money. Money does not build roads or anything else, it is irrelevant. A project is always the people of a community coming together and applying the resources they have, to whatever it is they wish to see get done. What is needed is a way to prioritize the allocation of resources. Money does that in the capitalist system. But it is a methodology open to considerable abuse. Why build only those things that those with money or those who can access capital want built? It's not reasonable. Agorocracy utilizes the mechanisms of the market. The market owns the supply. The community in the form of local groups express demand. Demand is expressed as a percentage of our available resources committed to a project. In other words, the market operates as a budget. The community has X resources that are then allocated to projects. The labor needed to complete a project is assigned from the labor that is available. Economic development is nothing more than a community assigning what it has to what it needs doing. The rate of development is proportionate to the effectiveness of its allocations. When someone works, he or she is paid in preferred shares. That is, when we work, we add value to the community. That value is measured in equity and equity is represented by preferred shares. These become the unit of exchange, or the money we use. All equipment, supplies, labor, and everything else donated become the assets of the community and are paid for using preferred shares. Thus, the community has access to the wealth of the community to be applied to whatever project the citizens decide. Managers would be hired to oversee the operations, but power over projects would remain with the people. The truth of the 5 errors. There are 5 errors that have formed the institutions of man. These errors are associated historically with Babylon and Nimrod. He was the first to utilize the 5 great errors. These 5 errors are also 5 great evils. The 5th truth is that these 5 ancient errors are 5 great evils. These errors are the state as a profession, the use of assets as money which led to double-entry bookkeeping, private ownership or ownership as a right, and the substitution of ethics in place of morality, which led to the concept of legal rights. All of these errors produce risk and pose a threat of loss. These 5 errors are talked about as if they were great innovations. All 5 errors serve as pillars of our civilizations. Collectively they ruin civilizations. These errors generate social costs. Social costs are things society and future generations pay over actual costs. Social costs are always a burden on civilized people. All social costs are created directly or indirectly by the state. When social costs become excessive, societies fail. Social costs include unemployment, debt, poverty, inflation, taxation, pollution, and most crime. Collectively, social costs are known as the 10 great evils. Social costs are not natural phenomenon. They are not natural to civilization. They are costs created by parasites that are downloaded onto society and future generations. Economists refer to them as externalized costs. Regardless of what one calls them, they are the product of institutions that incorporate the 5 errors. The problem is that the state has no source of income other than what it can take from the market. The state divests the market to build up the polity. Governments of necessity must intervene in the market even if they think this is a wise choice. Intervention is founded on the belief that the state has authority over the nation's assets and people. This is not true. Ownership belongs to the Creator only. Ownership is not a right, it is earned through work. If it was a right, it would need to be administrated. The people of a place own the equity they formed from the assets of a location. This is the doctrine of dominion as provided by God. We have a right to only that which is earned by work. The principles of subsidiarity and parsimony tell us that the simple solution is the best, meaning least costly. Rationality tells us we ought not to pay for what we did not create nor costs that are not needed. The state is an additional expense and layer of authority, that is not needed. Money has no value. Money in its pure state is the quantification of value or a means of exchange. It is the physical manifestation of bookkeeping, a way to keep running accounts in a dynamic economy. Money represents accounting, so in its most basic sense it is simply a physical manifestation of value. However, assets are used for money, money becomes a measure of its own value. This gives us double-entry bookkeeping, which is an evil itself. Using something with value such as cigarettes or gold as a currency makes the asset more valuable. If gold is used as a currency, gold not only has its intrinsic value, it has a value given to it by being the means by which all other values are denominated. The more valuable the base asset becomes, the more the currency loses value, compared to the base asset, causing inflation. The more dollars, for example, it takes to buy gold, the less value the dollar has compared to gold. Over time gold becomes so valuable people do not want to spend it or trade it for currency, thus gold is hoarded, and it becomes more and more difficult to back a paper currency with bullion. Thus, trade becomes difficult and ultimately impossible. Everyone with gold or the base asset prefers to just hang on to it. Gold or some other asset used as currency suffers from this same problem. As gold becomes more valuable compared to all other assets, it is hoarded and there is less gold in circulation, making trade difficult. This shortage of gold creates economic costs. Money is a measure of value, and like a ruler the units which compose it have no intrinsic value. The solution is a currency that is no more than accounting units with no intrinsic value, thereby ending the problem of inflation. Because the currency is just a measuring tool, its value never changes. There is no inflation and thus no social costs created by or at